I can't give you anything but love, baby. That's the only thing I've plenty of, baby. Dream a while, scheme a while, we're sure to find happiness. And I guess all those things you've always
So is this the perfect screwball comedy?
It is pretty perfect between the acting and the writing and, of course, the underlying social issues. It's very powerful. Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, Ralph Bellamy, all at the top of their game. And the plots, the two interdependent plots with the relationship of Hillary and Walter, with the public hanging that's impending, and the satire of marriage and of politics and the press, and the fact that it's not sentimental at all. At the end, we just saw there was the happy ending, no kiss, no embrace. They didn't even look at each other.
Right, and I love how she still has, she has the big bag and the coat and everything, and he's like running ahead of her and not carrying anything. It's a perfect callback to the beginning. And her character is so iconic.
Yes, she is probably the most complex of the screwball heroines of the classic era. She is, first of all, given the role reversal and then her internal conflict, and she's also very flawed as a character. It was revolutionary to see a woman in a man's job, and also that her personality attributes are what were normally associated with men. She was very ambitious, very hard driving, and fast talking and keeping up with the boys. That was pretty radical at that time. Of course, she was just an ambitious reporter. The internal conflict that she suffers with her job versus marriage, and her ex-spouse and her fiance, those internal fights, and also her flaw is her hypocrisy. She denounces the political corruption and the irresponsible press, but yet she herself bribes the jailer to have access to the inmate. Right. She feeds the inmate a narrative so that she can write a compelling story. She doesn't intervene when Bruce's mother is kidnapped and when he's arrested a second time. So,
they're made for each other, really, truly. I mean, you always talk about the anti-heroic male being such an essential part of screwball comedy, but she is just an anti-hero as well, so it's terrific. Yes. I love it when these terrible people find each other. It's beautiful. So this is the second Howard Hawks we've had, because we did Bringing Up Baby, and then we have this, and we'll have Ball of Fire. Howard Hawks is just such an incredible director. I mean, the range.
He is in the pantheon of great directors, and his reputation has only increased over the decades. He made films in every genre successfully, and he was raised in an affluent family. His background, his education was as an engineer. He started in the silent era and then transitioned right into talkies because he was mechanically minded. That technology didn't scare him at all. He embraced it. He was also very astute in his observation that the initial talkies dialogue was very artificial and theatrical, and the filmmakers were making the actors speak very slowly so that every word could be on the soundtrack. And he sought very naturalistic dialogue, which he got, and he realized that people interrupt each other and they talk fast in real life, and he wanted films to reflect that.
You know, one of my favorite movies is The Big Lebowski, which we filmed here, we showed here last June, and that's one of my favorite things about that film is the dialogue and that natural part of people stepping over each other, and someone kind of starts a sentence and then trails off, and it's so natural, and in comedy it works so well, and it's really fascinating to see, you know, the origins of that really with this film.
And it does all start with Howard Hawks. And he had 5 collaborations with Cary Grant. They're all masterpieces. And he just, not only was the pacing of the dialogue so important to him, it was also the dialogue itself. He was a lover of words, and he never worried about censorship because he worked with the writers to make sure that through double entendre and innuendo and risque dialogue, he got his points across just fine.
That's great. And just Cary Grant in this movie, but you know, it's like every time we have Cary Grant in a film, I say, Cary Grant in this movie was so amazing, because he just really is. I think for me, my favorite is when he is kind of playing sort of a devilish character, like we saw him in the Philadelphia Story, when he gets that sort of little like twinkle, and it's just so wonderful. I mean, he's a perfect foil for Katharine Hepburn in bringing up Baby with his dorkiness, but this is the Cary Grant that personally is just fantastic.
This is right at the top. Though Howard Hawks probably is known more now for his female characters.
Right, you were telling me earlier about the Hawksian woman.
Yes.
Share with everyone about what you were saying earlier.
The Hawksian woman is a phrase named by film critic Naomi Wise in 1971. After she saw Howard Hawks' films and realized there was a common thread of female characteristics of his leading ladies. And to quote here, the Hawksian woman speaks her mind. She holds her own with the men, with wit, fast talk, banter, verbal bantering. She acts to get what she wants. She's known by a nickname, not a forename, like male characters. She often has the same profession as male characters, and she remains cool under stress. She's one of the gang, and while still remaining feminine, she's not a sex object. And the excellent biography, a series of interviews, book-long interviews with Howard Hawks, Hawks on Hawks by Joseph McBride, devotes an entire chapter to the Hawksian woman.
Oh, that's fascinating. And that kind of, that sort of archetype fell out of favor in films.
Yes. While it all kind of dates back to the federal government, actually. At the onset of World War II, men were going overseas, and the government was quite concerned of the economy crashing. So they started a campaign. Come on, women, you're equal to men. You can get out and do any job. Let's get you out in the workforce. It's your patriotic duty to work. So they really encouraged women to work. If you recall the Rosie the Riveter campaign, and Hollywood was right in lockstep and showing women desirable women in a favorable light. Now, after World War II, the government had another problem. 15 million American servicemen were now coming back, and the government had a strong interest in getting them reassimilated in society and getting them reemployed. So then they changed the message. Come on, women, give up your job for a man. Go home, be at home, do not work. And Hollywood at that point was really feeling heat from the federal government. They had what is called a vertical monopoly. They produced films, they distributed films, and they exhibited films in movie theaters they owned. They were terrified that the government was going to break up the monopolies, which in fact it did eventually. So what they wanted to do was stay out of the crosshairs of the federal government. So whatever messaging the government had, Hollywood was going to be right in lockstep, giving that message through its films. And in fact, you see this pivot, very dramatic, of how women are portrayed in film. Now, the desirable women are women who are wives and mothers and stay home and don't work. And it was so obvious and apparent. The writer, Germaine Greer, she named this obvious change in Hollywood as the female character as the female eunuch, because basically they were powerless and passive.
That's fascinating.
So that was the end of the Hawksian woman.
No more Hawksian woman. Yeah. So this film is another of a remarriage comedy that we've talked about before. It's a big part of the screwball genre. What was it about the comedy of remarriage that was so common in these? This kind of has all, has the newspaper, the newspapers, the remarriage. I mean, it really like checks all the boxes.
Yes, there are a lot of very common screwball comedy plot elements in this film, and the remarriage is one of them. The writer Stanley Cavell wrote an entire book on remarriage and screwball comedy, but to distill it down to 3 points. The first is that screwball comedy is a plot device that allows writers to keep the couple separated so that they can develop the battle of the sexes, which is of course fundamental to the screwball comedy. Number 2 is that married couples are older and they have much more complicated relationships, and they have more challenging issues and more interesting issues than young people who are dating, which is the typical couple for a romantic comedy genre film. So the third thing is that married couple completely circumvent the censor rules, because there was strong censorship of film, that it not contain any sexual visual depictions or in the dialogue any implied sexual relationship. But since the people had been married, the censors didn't need to worry about that. So there wasn't the tight censorship, and filmmakers could be a little freer with dialogue.
Interesting. It also gives you a chance to jump right into the bickering, right? I mean, you really can.
Right, because they're
have
divorced.
Right, that makes sense. So let's talk about like the racial tropes in this film, and like some of the comedy, some of the jokes are a little like not great, like the pickaninnies. But that's such a product of the era.
It is an era that went on and on and on.
It still is with us today.
Yes, it is troubling, the black tropes, and it certainly didn't start with this film, and it didn't end here either. There is a racial slur in the film, and also there's the implication about the black constituents, that there's something implied wrong, that the mayor and the sheriff would be seeking and courting their vote.
Right, like there's this huge political power that
Right.
never actually existed.
Yes.
Right, and the conspiratorial sort of thinking.
Right.
I mean, it's not, obviously this isn't as blatant as a lot of films,
Right.
but
It
it's
is very
still,
mild compared to other films that are
Yeah.
just so cringeworthy and embarrassing, and have aged so horribly, and highlight the problems that have exacerbated our race issues in America.
It happens so much with comedy. There's so much social reflection in comedy. We showed the Eddie Murphy film Trading Places last December, which is one of my favorite movies ever. I love that film.
And one of my favorite Ralph Bellamy films.
Oh, that's right.
He plays one of the Duke brothers.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well that leads us to our next topic, but oh my gosh, thank you for that. I love this film and that one, and somehow I never connected those dots. But the same thing, we're showing, a lot of the comedies from the 80s, but we're showing Trading Places, and we have to put the disclaimer. Oh, and by the way, randomly, they thought it was appropriate to have Dan Aykroyd in blackface in this film, right?
Exactly.
But it's I think that it's with exhibiting film, it can be difficult, and again, this one is very mild, right, relative to a lot, but it is important to talk about. It is, I think that so long as there are like disclaimers, that the very egregious films maybe are not given as much play, but it is good to kind of have these discussions and at least use it to like talk about what's problematic.
Yes, because we need to know where we've been, and people may not be aware of how endemic the problem is. If you think of just a year before this film was released, the biggest film of all time, Gone with the Wind, was released, and of course that film romanticizes the South and romanticizes the horrors of slavery. Also, you see across the board in every genre of film, blacks are depicted. You don't see blacks as reporters or editors, lawyers or doctors, any profession. They're relegated to basically being maids and porters on trains. They always speak in broken English, so the implication is they're illiterate and uneducated. They are basically at service. They don't have personal lives. You don't see any of that developed. And what happens in a segregated society like America was, if you don't have contact with black people, you're learning, you're getting educated from movies. Well, this is the way black people must be. And I can speak from personal knowledge of the segregation, because my home, I live in one of the oldest parts of Palm Springs, and I did have the opportunity to see the title documents to my home, and in the neighborhood when it was subdivided in the 30s, there was a racial restriction.
Wow.
So you see, when people aren't living together, they have to grab their information. They get it from the movies, and whether we like it or not, films affect public perception.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, let's go back to Ralph Bellamy. He's such a great foil for Cary Grant in this film. I mean, his performance is subtle, but he's just he's hilarious, but it's just perfect with Cary Grant.
He really is. And a foil, of course, is a character, a secondary character that has opposite characteristics of the lead actor in order to showcase that actor's attributes. And here you see Ralph Bellamy as shy and a little naive, a sympathetic character. He, of course, loses the girl, and he was contrasting even in his appearance with his blonde hair. Ralph Bellamy was a master of sophisticated comedy. He appeared in over 100 films with from the 30s all the way through. His last film was Pretty Woman, 1990. Huge career, and just does a fantastic job.
And Trading Places, they still carry it over. I didn't make that connection. Well, I always love having these conversations with you, Aliece, and if there's anything else that you want to cover, we do have a bonus question for a giveaway of Dark Angel, the Cary Grant biography.
I would like to finish our discussion today talking about the one and only Cary Grant.
Yes.
Because he is the definitive leading man. I mean, he is just insanely handsome and charming and irresistible, but he's also brave, and no one talks about this. With his good looks and his popularity, the easy road for him to choose would have been the heroic roles, the earnest characters, the moral people, the honorable people. Instead, he chooses to be the anti-hero. I mean, think about the despicable qualities that Walter Burns has. He is an inveterate liar. He has operatives and fixers working at his newspaper. He gets Bruce, the fiance, arrested 3 times. He gets the mother kidnapped. He manipulates everybody. He's unmoved when Molly, the prostitute, jumps out of the window. He's unmoved that Bruce's mother may be dead from the car accident. And finally, he is unable to tell Hildy that he needs her or that he wants her to stay. I mean, that is, but those are all anti-heroic attributes, but yet we still root for him. That is the genius of Cary Grant.
I can't give you anything but love, baby. That's the only thing I've plenty of, baby. Dream a while, scheme a while, we're sure to find happiness, and I guess